There ought to be flu. There ought to be flu. Oh, getting the feedback. Quick, mute it. Wrong page. Total fail. Schoolboy error. Shut up and just.
Welcome to your awakening. Please take all as your reality is adjusted.
Hello, ladies and chest feeders. Welcome once again. Another edition of Sol Excalibre on this moon day evening. So I was looking at the chat room. You can tell when I'm looking at the chat room because it's over there and the camera's there and I'm looking at the screen there. So you can see which one is which. Hello to everyone in the chat room. Greetings, well met fellow, hail. And I think, let me get my screen organised so I can see the chat room properly. There we go. So I can look at the YouTube stream with the chat room, which usually keeps a bit more of the cache, unlike the StreamYard one. So hello to everyone in there. Hello, good people. Thanks for joining us. Good morning, Global Gulag. Have you got your QR code yet? You got your ID, one form of ID or another, preferably biometric, electronic. I think day by day, week by week, it's steadily becoming more and more apparent to people that that's really what is going on here. That's what this is mainly about. All this situation over the last year plus now, is near enough a year and a half. It's primarily about getting you all linked into a system where we can all be identified and tracked and traced and all that data mining stuff that they love to do. So I was scrolling up and down the chat while I was blathering. I'll try and get my cough out of the way before I start. Last week, I did the episode called Epilogue. Sorry. This week, it's Epic Vlog. Both of them have got question marks on them because, you know, I'm on the naughty step with the GooTube. So this is part of kind of an experiment, a very loose sort of, I suppose it'd be better to call it a test rather than an experiment because there's no control group or anything like that. There's no double blind. But it's just to see how the algorithm, if it is just the algorithm, reacts or whether it's a direct monitoring that's going on. I'm pretty certain they're on some kind of list. Of course I am because I'm on the GooTube. So, you know, just being on the GooTube puts you on a list. But I think I'm on a shadow ban or a watch list or something like that. Because, you know, all the stuff we've mentioned multiple times over the past few months, things like comments disappearing and stuff like that. Yeah, there's definitely the shadow banning going on. So this week, yeah, last week's was called Epilogue because I wasn't sure if it was going to be an epilogue to continuing these streams. And this week I'm going to do it because last week I shared a video. I shared James Corbett's Science Says. There's a lot of S's in that. And when you've got no teeth, it's not easy to say. Science Says. And I think he sort of mentioned it on his last New World Next Week that he uploaded, where he made comment about the fact that even though his channel got shut down for broadcasting that video, other people have subsequently uploaded the video and their channels have not been affected. That's, like I said last week, that's why I wanted to try that out and see what the algorithm did, if anything. And it's been over a week. And I've not seen any reaction from it in that sense. Sometimes it's taken a week or more before they do anything anyway. Like when they removed episode 22, that was reaching back in the past, as it were. And I've been expecting others to be pulled up, but so far we're still trucking. So this week I'm going to do this episode. This is why it's called Epic Vlog with a question mark, because I don't think it's fair that I call it epic. It's what other people think of it that makes it epic or not. Yeah, I'm a bit presumptive, so I thought I'll stick a question mark on there because we don't know. We'll see. And we'll see how the algorithm reacts to it. This week, I'm not going to screen share anything like the videos or news articles or documents or anything like that. I might, as we go along, drop some links in the side chat if I think it's appropriate when we're talking about stuff. But the concept is, it's just going to be us talking this week. So if you don't want to listen to three guys talking about all this stuff, and now's the time to choose something else to occupy yourself with and spend your attention on. But we're going to try just verbalizing about a lot of the things that's been happening and the stuff that's happened over the last week, and maybe picking the bones out of some of the events that have occurred. And I will be only a little bit careful with how I say some things, and that's more how to put it. It's not that I'm not going to say it. I'm just going to be try to be careful how I construct what I say. So, for example, if I mention something like the flu, like I was sort of doing a bit of a sing-song at the start about the flu, if I mention things about the flu, I will be careful to construct what I say to give as accurate as I feel portrayal or representation of what it is I'm trying to get across. Because I think part of the current YouTube's bullcrap in their terms and conditions about this medical misinformation shit is just academically inaccurate. And that's me just being nice in the sense of like, look, even your own academic bodies don't treat information in this fashion. So your claims of like, oh, if you mention this kind of thing in this way, we're just going to say you're talking medical misinformation. That is just, it's utter, just blatant censorship for a narrative reason. It's nothing to do with being academically honest or intellectually honest or accurate to the information available, etc., etc. I'm sure you guys all know the situation. You've been tuning into this kind of content, and you know how things have been on the YouTube. So, hopefully you get the point. So, before I cough anymore, let's get into the main thing that's happened over the last week, or what I think is the main thing anyway. And that was the big gathering of the non-shopping crowds in London. I like the way some people have expressed it of like, they went to London for a shopping trip, but they just didn't happen to actually buy anything. They didn't see anything they fancied purchasing, so they just walked around a bit with a whole lot of other people who also seemed to be there for similar reasons. The fact that you have to.
I was going to say we're waking up, Cookie. Yeah. That's it. The swell's happening. It's starting to rise. Yeah. We're seeing a lot more people come out.
With the increasing length of the day, in other words, more sun that people are getting here in the UK. It's funny how, people like to come out when the sun's out. Talk about natural law. You want to get people out of their houses. So you need some nice weather, then they'll come out. It's only the unusual ones that are like, that they like the rain. Like me, a fluvophile, I think it's called. Somebody who enjoys the rain. Yeah, I'll quite happily walk around when it's raining and whatever. But most folks know they want the sun out, and then they'll come out. Then they'll stand up for themselves and say something because the sun's shining. I did think that when I was watching the footage. Yeah, the amount of people who were obviously enjoying the sunshine because the sun was out, but it did make me wonder, like, would the numbers be as good if it was rainy?
Well, yeah, I suppose that does play a part, but
maybe it's just
as this goes forward, though. I think as people get more and more, we'll see those numbers rise, and the mainstream media tried to play it down, didn't they, all day?
Oh yeah.
didn't want to really talk about it. Sky thought it was just a few people gathering and police protest, and it's so they were distancing themselves from anything because it exposes their mainstream bullshit lie. You see, all of it, and they won't dare talk about it. They're going to have to at some point when there's 10 million, or all the cities across the UK and across the world are all, everybody's out and calling out everything. They're going to have to say something at some point, and start telling the truth. It's a distant dream of the mainstream media. Get people in there to tell the truth. Wow.
You naive fool.
Yeah. It's a dream of mine.
They're gonna blame you for the 4th and the 5th and the 6th wave.
Yeah.
It's the nth wave.
Yeah. Well, that's how you got to be. And it's like I'm seeing little, been saying it for a year or so since it all started. Wake more people up. It'll get more people seeing what's really happening, going on, and
it has a cascade
in everything in their lives, every aspect of their lives and things. It's all changed. So it's having an effect.
Nature works in exchange of pressure. I've tried to describe this before. If you think of bubbles, I know this might seem a bit weird. You think of bubbles under pressure, like soap bubbles. You get all different sizes of bubbles based on how much pressure is inside them compared to the others around them, etc. They squeeze and squeeze and squeeze. The system keeps squeezing. That pressure has to go somewhere. It backs up and it builds up and it builds up until eventually it goes pop. Or it causes whatever it is that's holding it to break. It shatters that restriction. So they know that once they start losing the narrative, which I think I've mentioned a few times recently, I think it's happening. It's beginning to tumble. The dominoes are beginning to tumble. To mention some of the other stuff over the week, because I think it's relevant to talking about the protest. Bojo allegedly talking about bodies piling up. When I saw the headline, it made this might only be sort of understood by people who are into kind of heavy metal music. There's a band called Slipknot, and a good many years ago they did a song called "Let the Bodies Hit the Floor." And it's sort of kind of psychotic stuff. It's fairly dark, aggressive stuff. But anyway, the point is, as soon as I saw the headline, I just had this mental image of Bojo standing here on the stage with Slipknot singing, "Let the bodies pile up high, let the bodies pile up high."
It would go quite well, that wouldn't it? If he was dressed in that suit and they were all dressed the way they were. And he just comes out on stage, and starts ranting in the microphone.
There was that, and then not long after, the stories about, well, actually it was just before that headline, the stories about Cummings. Cummings has come forth yet again, claiming that Bojo had been doing something naughty with finances. It's like, really?
The leaker. He's leaking, isn't he?
Cummings messing with money, really?
He's got all the data, Cookie. He's got everything. Do you think he left there with nothing? He left with all the text, everything that he could, bring out at some point to embarrass him and to, this is what's happening. It's
the convenient timing of it. Those two things fill in the news media here in the UK on the weekend that the protest gathering happened. I call it the protest gathering, where you could get bogged down in technical jargon and legal jargon and whatever. The gathering that happened in London. Isn't it funny how the media pretty much across the board, certainly in what's still called the print media, even though most of them they publish online rather than in hard copy, the print media didn't cover it at all, pretty much. I think the Daily Mail gave it a little mention where they said something around like a few thousand protesters or something like that. And on the other media, the BBC certainly didn't go anywhere near it. Sky News did a less than 2 minutes package, I think, which was deliberately meant to be derogatory. And the guy doing the presentation was talking about angry protesters while there was happy, smiling people walking past him in the crowd. There's literally thousands of people walking past, all smiling and singing and chanting, and he's going, "Oh, the angry protesters!" Oh, there was pretty much nothing in the UK media, and it seemed obvious to me, especially the fact that the BBC did not post anything about it at all until later in the day, which we'll get to. But they were obviously on a D notice. And I haven't heard anyone else mention this. And I know it's one of those things where, well, how do you prove it? Can you get the actual documentation of them being given the D notice order and shit? You can't. But how else do you describe the complete silence from the BBC, which is the outright propaganda arm of the UK state? So if they, which are meant to be this world-leading, fair and unbiased reporting agency on news and information of the day, etc., if they haven't said anything at all, that's a D notice. That's what a D notice does. It basically means do not talk about this subject, don't cover it in any way whatsoever. There is zero to be printed in the news about whatever topic they've stuck the D notice on.
Yeah.
So to me, it was obvious they did that with the actual gathering. None of the other media covered it. A few international ones mentioned it, like Sky Australia did a little bit on it.
Press TV do things on it as well.
Yeah, RT covered it. They had a live stream guy there, not an actual reporter, just somebody walking around. And some of the American media covered it. I think AP did a little bit on it.
Well, they're too embarrassed, aren't they? Because they're going to say, well, 500,000 people are protesting against all the things that we're saying are good for you. They're disagreeing. It doesn't look good, does it? And when it's 2 million people, when it's 3 million people, when it's whatever numbers it's going to rise to, I think going forward this year, at some point they're going to have to address it.
It's building. And it's building, I think now this year and going into the summer, it's building at a faster pace. Because that's the thing about that kind of cascade effect. It might not be accurate to call it truly exponential, but in a kind of colloquial fashion, in an anecdotal fashion, or in a rhetorical fashion, it's exponential. Once it starts building up, it spreads more rapidly. This is something about this kind of situation that in a cliched way, I say it's the truth is viral.
The truth virus. That's what it is. Yeah, exactly.
Shout out to Jam Norris.
And when that hits you,
years ago.
When that hits you, be ready because your world changes. And
this whole
the ride.
year, 1 year plus.
Yeah,
I said this just before we were coming on air. Like, this 1 year plus now in this year, the fact that it's been a full year beyond the situation, the original terror. It's no longer like people are being offered a red pill. Now it's like you're getting a red suppository rammed up in your colon. If you're still struggling, if you're still stuck in ignorance or denial at what is happening around you because you've just bought in totally to the narrative that they've spun to you, and you are going to suffer that red suppository. You're not going to be just somebody offering you, your choice, red pill, your choice if you want to pick it up and take it. And, where you go from there is up to you. No, it's no longer going to be a choice. It's going to be foisted upon you. You're going to either experience something yourself directly, or you're going to know or be related to somebody that experiences something directly. And that is that red suppository. It's not I'll take this by free will choice anymore. It's like you have this forced upon you.
Well, that's where they want to take it. In China, that's happening in China, which people maybe didn't realize that you have mandatory vaccines and things like they force it upon the people. In North Korea as well, in other places, I think. But they're the two that I know of mandatory. No choice, nothing. That's what they want the rest of the world like. And you've always said we model ourselves on the Chinese models that they've been building out there for the people, how they live, how they do everything. And then become suddenly a massive economic, powerhouse as well. World, challenging the US now, probably overtaking them, haven't they? and a sense of
in,
wealth.
Certainly in manufacturing and
Yeah.
distributed wealth. Yeah, they've
Yeah.
got more billionaires.
Yeah.
Than
And where they've got their
anywhere
people,
else.
and they've got their people completely hypnotized, you know,
Yeah.
and generation after generation, just keep them there, indoctrinating them continually, and then they're forcing them to do things I'm sure a lot of them don't want to do. But you know, it's that's where we've got to change things as well. This forcing upon people, even, but they want this for the whole world. There's enough people horrified to know that it stops in China and it should end in China. You know what I mean? It should end in North Korea. All these things should be stopped. People shouldn't be forced to do anything they don't want to do anywhere. And there are, you know, human rights stuff and all that. I think Lowlands put something up before, something. You know, there's all sorts of Nuremberg codes and everything that say this. You know, that people are not being forced into doing what they don't want to do. But it happens in these countries. It happens out there, and we sit there and watch it happen. And then slowly, passively, they bring it on to us, you know, in a slow propaganda, NLP'd gadget world we've got living in now, you know, where we're totally sort of hooked in because we want to be, you know, rather than being forced to be hooked in. Now it just goes that step further. Everybody go and get your, you know, your juice, and go and get 2 doses, 3 doses, how many it takes, you know, it's just what you do now. But half aren't, like I've always said. It's only the few who are totally locked into this, and the rest aren't. And when we get to summer and this so-called, you know, third wave washing up or whatever, they'll blame the people who haven't had the juice. Maybe that will be a way they'll go with the propaganda. Possibly, I don't know, but that's how they maybe want to, you know, it'd be like the, you know, finger pointing even more, you know.
Apologies for the sudden multiple posts in the chat.
Oh, I'm not looking at the chat. Sorry.
No, so it's just I didn't realise it had split it up into multiple comments like that. But that was a comment left from Gary, Society of the Spectacle.
Oh, it was Gary. Sorry, wasn't Lola.
Yeah,
Gary. Sorry. Yeah, he put that in the chat.
He can't get online tonight on the Skype or anything, so he just left me a comment. But he mentioned that what I've just put in the chats in the side was what he posted as a comment under a Daily Mail article about a lot of this shit recently. Yeah, the vax is experimental. The Nuremberg Code, 1947, permissible medical experiments in entry 1. Voluntary consent is essential. 3, human experiments should be based on previous animal experiments. 4, experiments should be conducted by avoiding physical, mental suffering and injury. 5, no experiments should be conducted if it is believed to cause death or disability. And 6, the risk should never exceed the benefits.
Yeah.
And he got a lot of thumbs up on the Daily Mail comments. So, you know, there's a lot more people are aware of this kind of stuff now. Even though I know, you know, as per usual with everything, it can get dragged in multiple different directions, and it can end up descending into petty arguments over details and things like that. But the core principles remain the same. This is about them removing your choice in one way or another, and in their fashion, in one way or another, them forcing you into a situation where you abdicate that decision making for yourself. You know, you hand it over to the state system. Yeah. The China model example as well. I want to mention this now. It seems like it's a good opportunity to do this, because I've been talking about this point for years, and I know there's many other people that have mentioned this, including one of the usual main culprits, like the usual suspects, is David Icke. And he's talked about how China is the model that they're trying to roll out across the world. As far as I know, he only started talking about that in about the 2000s, maybe the late 90s. I'm not certain. I can't remember from some of his books back then. But this is something I was told by somebody before then, and it didn't really connect for me at the time, because there was a lot of information I was missing. I didn't know about things like Agenda 21 at the time. You're talking like early 90s. And this was someone I was related by marriage to, who was very high up in the academic world. He was an international traveler and tutor. He was well renowned in his study field to the to the extent that he was invited all over the world to give lectures and teaching courses and whatever. And he had a very strong relationship with the academics in China. He could speak Chinese, he could write Chinese. Yeah, I think both Mandarin and Cantonese. So he was most definitely, on board with a lot of the situation that was happening as China was building up its industrialized power, its commercial power in the 90s. And it was going through that slow transition from extreme communism to a more kind of diluted version that's sort of socialism with a little bit of capitalism to keep the people happy. That's basically what they've done. They've given the people a kind of pseudo capitalist environment, a playground where they can become wealthy and whatever, but obviously their choices are still limited and controlled by the state. So he was involved in all that, and he told me directly, he said, that is where they're taking all of us in the near future. And as I say, at the time, it didn't really, I didn't realize what the fuck he was talking about. Yeah. I was just interested. Like, oh, you go over to China to teach them. Well, that's cool, bro. Yeah. Tell me all about it. Yeah. But no, he said the kind of environment they have in China is literally the blueprint model, like a testing ground for what they want to try and achieve pretty much globally. I know there's going to be little outposts here and there that won't join in or whatever. Then I started learning about things like Agenda 21. And it took me a few years to sort of start connecting the dots of what he was talking about. And he's like, right, okay, now I get it. And as I say, many other people have pointed this out over the years. Alan Watt as well was another one who pointed a lot of this out that I learned a lot from. The China model thing is not a joke. It's not a what if. Shout out to Larkin Rose. He put up a good video this afternoon. Check it out if you haven't heard it. Talking about the kind of idea of like, don't expend your energy being afraid of things that are just a speculation of the future. There's a lot about the future that we can't predict. Yeah. And when it comes to the controllers in particular, this is something I put in my notes and I mentioned it before we started. One of the main points that they rely on is the manipulation of narratives. In other words, storytelling. They tell us stories about what the future is going to be because that is their choice. They want the future to be the way they are telling us. It's kind of like a very long-term gaslighting effect. They tell us the future will be a certain way, and then they keep nudging us in that direction. Yeah. And then it becomes like we're all sat here going, see, look what's happened. We knew this would happen because they've been telling us for years, in all the dystopian movies and whatever. So exactly. Yeah. So
it happens over years, like you say, decades and decades and decades. Generations come and go. So you get what you want in the end.
I think it's pretty fair to say our generation, because we're children of the 60s and 70s, so I'm presuming a bit, Peter, I'm not sure, maybe you're a bit younger than that, but that time period, that time period gave us a lot of those dystopian narratives, and that was the age of the Great Cold War, basically. And that pretty much ended with the fall of the Berlin Wall. I think it's a fair sort of demarcation of that kind of generational time period, that narrative paradigm of that period. We've now been going through a transition to a completely different generational paradigm. And this in-between time from like what was Berlin Wall was 1984, wasn't it? Yeah, funny coincidence there. No coincidence. 1984 till now has been them attempting to do this transition to this spreading out or franchising that Chinese technocratic model across most of the world. So when we're talking about this kind of, the whole event that's been happening over the last year plus has been sold on a narrative, a story being told to the public that there is this thing going around that's hurting people and making people ill, and a few of them are, well, the way they've been telling it, certainly from the start, they've been making it sound like it's killing everyone. We're all going to die from this illness. But that whole narrative has been just a cover story, an excuse, a Trojan horse, a vehicle to carry the real reasoning, the real thing that they actually are attempting to achieve. In other words, as I said earlier, the story of the future is not completed yet. It gets written constantly every moment. The moments are still going. So the future story is not already written in stone, as they say.
Well, it might be in Hollywood.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, they've already, they've handed over their fucking authority, their autonomy, their free will. They're all in the Matrix. They're quite happy to chomp on the Matrix steak, and they don't care if it's real or not. They are living in the illusionary world that can be defined by the metaphor of the Matrix. It is living an illusion. They're not really alive. They gave up their life when they started playing that Matrix game.
Yeah. And these agendas are long agendas, like Agenda 21 is 400 years. First century, planning it out for you, decade by decade, and nudging you closely more forward into this, like I say, where they want us to go. But there's a swing back, there's a pushback, there's a awareness going on, there's knowledge being spread, there's people going, hang on a second, I'm not having that. So and
I think and I know some people don't like this kind of connection because they'd rather stick with just kind of like what you could call the cold hard facts, the day-to-day physical facts of reality. They don't want to add any strangeness into it. But I think it is because there is classically that generational upswell of energy. Every generation wants to change the world to be their world. That's just a natural reaction of all of us as beings as we experience this thing we call life. We want the world to be the way we would like it to be. And that's true on a generational sense, masses of generation after generation doing the same kind of thing. The system is well aware of this, and they've learned how to ride that tiger over the centuries and use that energy. So what we've been experiencing is that upswell of energy of people going, hang on, we don't like this. We want to go this direction. We don't want to go that direction that you're dragging us. That looks crap. No, let's go this way. And they have to appropriate that energy and redirect it into constructing the future that they want. To me, it's just making that connection to what we saw over the weekend.
Yeah, and do not remember what they've been saying for the past 12 months, these idiots, like the two on the left and right here, Fauci and Goethe. And
that's what I think. It takes, I know it's unfortunate, but it takes a little bit of time because it does hold true. I think it's Mackey, the quote. I know I've used this a few times recently to try and get the point across. People go mad in crowds and come to their senses slowly and one by one. I think I'm getting the quote near enough right. I might be misquoting it slightly. But the point is, unfortunately, because you have that question of trust, and Peter mentioned this last week, and I think it's a really valid point to raise with people to help them think about how they can be abused if somebody is in the mindset to abuse them. A lot of this entire situation, pretty much all of it, has hinged on the people who work in the medical and healthcare systems, right? The governmental narrative writers, the manipulators, the agenda pushers, whatever you want to call them, have been absolutely reliant on the compliance and conformity, basically, of those medical and healthcare workers to carry through this narrative, right? So it hinges on whether they believe the hype they're being told by the authorities, the trust the science bullshit and all that kind of thing. And for the general populace, the people who work in the healthcare system, your doctors in particular, they are the way I described it is they're basically only second in terms of your trust, other than what are probably your closest family members, your partner if you're married or in a relationship, or your closest family circle. That's usually, for most people anyway, that's your highest level of trust with others. And then just outside of that circle is your doctors. So when they're using those people that are so intrinsically trusted by the general populace, those are the people that are being used to push this certain narrative, then of course that means a large part of the populace is just going to accept it and believe it. Because why would my doctor lie to me just to sell me a vaccine? Would be just a simple question that somebody's probably going to think of straight away when you tell them some of this stuff. They'll be like, why would a doctor do that, mate? A doctor doesn't want to hurt me. They want to help me. So why are you telling me this conspiracy theory? And that trust level is, how can I put it, is very, very effective when it backfires. So the situation as we've had, it's taken many people, because the trust level that was involved, they bought into it fully. They were like, yes, of course, we do this, we do that, we do whatever those medical experts are telling us, because they're the medical experts, they're trying to help us, they care about our health, etc. So they bought into it strongly. And it's taken them a number of months, a year plus, to gradually build up the friction against that trust level, such that they can at least now start to go, well, hang on a minute, this isn't adding up anymore. This doesn't make any sense anymore. When they're telling us to do certain things, it's just becoming a bit ridiculous. And that questioning starts to tumble. And now
I'll be right back. I just got to sort the dog out. 2 minutes. I'll be right back.
All right, man. No worries. Right. Hope he's all right. But as that tumbling increases, just like an exponential curve, the pushback will increase as well. So we're starting to see that kind of thing with what happened over the weekend. I think it'd be good now to mention in that respect, or come to the point of talking about what happened on the evening of Saturday in Hyde Park, because that's one of the main things that the media and the system is going to try and manipulate and use to rubbish and dismiss any of the information that was brought forward by people who went and took part in that gathering. I'm not sure if I did say this. I think Peter might have mentioned it as we were talking. I watched most of it on the live feed, thanks to people like Subject Access, and Base Welshman did a bit of streaming as well, I think. And RT were covering it, and as I mentioned, some of the other, the usual media press coverage and whatever. But I was watching it through the afternoon and into the evening. It was a bit difficult to get a good gauge on the numbers of people that were there, because there seemed to be a D-notice on it, and there wasn't exactly a lot of aerial footage, aerial coverage. You couldn't get a good sort of big picture view of the stretch of the line of people and stuff like that. But on some of the scenes, like on the bank when they're walking along the riverbank, there were obviously quite a few 100,000 people there. I've heard some estimates saying 500,000, like 500,000 plus. I don't know. There could have been, but there was certainly well over 100,000. I'm guesstimating into multiple hundreds of thousands of people there. So out of hundreds of thousands of people, I'll just call it 500,000 for ease of explanation. Yeah.
I'm back now, by the way. Sorry, I saw it. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, carry on.
Out of over 500,000 people, it is the height of ignorance to claim that all of those people are just dumb, crazy conspiracy theorists who've spent too much time on weird websites on the internet and all that usual kind of mainstream media dismissal bullshit that they do. Sorry, you can't. And if you bother to actually spend the time and go and look at the situation and the people who turned up, you'll find a completely broad spectrum of the public. All ages, all colours, all religions, all attitudes. Yes, including some people would have brought along their own little protest points. You know, they want to protest about something in particular that's relevant to them and is not necessarily connected to the main thing that's going on. You know, that always happens at every big event. Or big gathering of people, anyway, like that. And that's one of the other things I wanted to mention. I think Hugo Talk sort of mentioned this on his video on Sunday, I think it was. It's difficult to gauge the numbers, but it's pretty obvious there were multiple hundreds of thousands there, possibly 500 plus thousand. In terms of protest marches or gatherings, or however you want to describe it in that sense, that is amongst one of the largest in the UK. You know, I was at the anti-war one that was in 2003, the anti-Iraq war one, before they started all the shock and awe bullshit. And there was about 1 million people at least. And yeah, you could see there was literally lots and lots of people there, yeah? And of course, there was a lot of aerial coverage or whatever at that particular one. But in terms of gatherings like that, protest gatherings, it's amongst one of the biggest in the UK ever. But as I mentioned earlier, the BBC didn't mention that at all. They just did a hit piece later in the evening talking about violent thugs in Hyde Park. But no mention about, well, you know, 500 plus thousand people potentially. There's no way you can claim that all of them are just crazy people that don't know what they're talking about. No, you can't. Sorry.
Yeah.
So are you just dismissing all the people that you would normally call valid? You know, you'd actually give them the credence to, you know, listen to their question or their inquiry or whatever. No, you're not willing to do that, even though you're supposed to be the broadcaster for the people, paid for by the people, etc., etc., etc. No, that doesn't add up unless the government knows that by covering or allowing coverage of that event, of that sheer number of gathering of people, it would completely disrupt their narrative. So they put a D notice on it. You're not allowed to know about it. Don't mention it. Don't talk about it at all. Don't cover it. Just ignore it and hope that nobody notices.
Yeah.
So that their narrative carries on.
Yeah, and they do that with lots of things and have done over the years, haven't they, where they won't focus on the main things that are going on and just want to...
And the public's reaction to it, their honest reaction to it.
And it's more self-evident now because of that, you know, 500,000 or a massive crowd come out and not anything really covered.
It only takes, well, this is, you know, I'll say allegedly, this is just the way their system is supposed to work. It only takes 100,000 signatures to get a question asked on Parliament floor. So if you can get 500,000 plus people together for a gathering in London, then you should be able to get 100,000 signatures to get them to ask particular questions on the parliamentary floor. Obviously, there'll be certain limitations to how you're allowed to word the question. You can't put in things like, yeah, we demand that people ask why Bojo is a total cunt. Yeah, Bojo is a fucking cunt, as the song goes. Yeah,
well, we know that.
You can't do something like that, of course, you know, but you could put them under severe pressure, like a few people have managed to do recently, you know, putting Bojo on the spot with awkward questions that he can't answer, or that he fumbles the ball like they're doing at the moment. Yeah, he fumbles the ball and makes it obvious that, they don't really want to be honest with you and they're not telling the whole truth with the bullshit they're selling you. That brings me to, let's talk about the situation in Hyde Park, because that's now the second time in relation to the lockdown protests and whatever, because pretty much the same thing happened last time, where after the marches took place, the gathering has took place and people have walked around and done their thing, and then you often, you know, they end the they end the march in the park because it's a good place for people to, gather at the end of the day and then disperse slowly, and people go off to their transport and whatever. But they'd done that again this time. And as people do, they're having a bit of a gathering in the park and, enjoying interacting with each other. And then the police turn up and turn it into a shit show. Again, thanks to people like Subject Access, I was watching this coverage of it, and there's some others. GB Resistance, I think, was one of the ones. UK column mentioned it today on their broadcast. They got some close-up footage of what was going on, and the people, as I say, were just gathered in the park. It was after the march, so there's not like 500,000 people there. There's just some of the people who'd originally been there for the march remained in the park and were interacting. And the police decided they wanted to break that up because, and this is something I've noticed that a lot of people are not mentioning, and I can question maybe their motives for not saying this kind of thing. I don't know, whatever. Maybe they're just trying to focus everyone's attention on some other reasoning. Anyway, amplification. That's what it comes down to, electronic amplification. Although I don't agree with it, but this is their attitude. This is the bureaucracy's attitude to that environment, to Speaker's Corner and to Hyde Park. Unless you have a license and a permit and whatever to set up an event in the park itself, you cannot have electronic amplification gear. So if you have that kind of gear and you're making use of it, they claim the right to come in and confiscate that gear from you. So that would have been the police's excuse for their actions on Saturday evening. They'll say something along the lines of people were gathered around others who were singing, because that's what it was. Some people had got some amplifiers, and there was a girl on a drum kit and a guy singing and another guy on guitar, and they were just playing music for the crowd, and the crowd was singing and enjoying themselves. But that's electronic amplification. So the police would have said, we were coming in to confiscate their gear. But it seems obvious to me when you look at the footage, you've got a crowd of quite a few hundred people, possibly 1,000 plus altogether. It's a bit sort of spread out in the park. And they've got a little squad of about 10 plus police wearing normal gear. I think they might have had stab vests on, but they didn't have full riot gear on. They just had their normal gear with their truncheon out. They looked like proper little, trainee bobbies marching in there like zombies with their truncheons all linked up together in a little squad huddle to try and push through the crowd. And you see them coming into the crowd, making a beeline for the amplification gear. It seems pretty obvious to me that their commanders knew full well what would happen and did it deliberately. They sent in a squad of sacrificial piggies to cause a fight, because when the crowd were obviously enjoying themselves, singing along to the music being played, and that music is coming from electronic amplification gear, then the police come in and take away the stereo, basically. How do you think the crowd is going to react? They knew full well the crowd would react, and it would probably descend into, fists being thrown and other things being thrown. So they send in this little squad armed with just their little truncheons to go in and take this equipment out of the middle of a crowd of hundreds of people. The result: some scuffling, some fighting, some bloodied policemen, why they've got these police women on those front lines, this little woman with a truncheon still in her hand, and the crowd are trying to pull the truncheon out of her hand, and she's just getting dragged along. And it does get a little bit silly. It gets laughable, but at the same time, you've got to remember that you don't know what could happen in the heat of a moment or who could be in that crowd. if one of those policemen got dragged away and separated, serious damage could have been done. And how then would that reflect on the rest of the thing that had happened on that day? The police commanders knew this full well when they sent that little squad in. And what you get is just a complete joke of them ending up having to run, literally leg it, back to the gates of the car park where they could try and regroup and hold a position. Yeah, because the crowd had beaten them, no problem whatsoever. They'd pushed them off and, in effect, kettled them in reverse. But that's exactly the effect they wanted. They got lots of photographs, they got lots of footage, they got lots of evidence against people who were in the crowd who would have been throwing punches or throwing stuff at them. Yeah, now they've got something to publish in the BBC press. Now the BBC publishes an article about the thuggish violence in Hyde Park by the anti-lockdown protesters. Do you see how that works? If the police were seriously wanting to just prevent crime and criminality in that environment that happened to include that part of the Hyde Park, all they had to do was leave a few of them bobbies around to watch for any true criminals doing shit and let the crowd enjoy themselves, and the night would have wore on, and eventually they would have dispersed and gone home. They might have needed a little encouragement, you know, like you do when you're closing up the pub at the end of the night. It's like, go home now, folks, go on, fuck off. But they didn't need to create that violence. Their actions created that violence.
They always do, though, don't they? They're there to provoke.
Yeah.
We've seen it all year. Yeah.
That's why I think they, you know, I call them sacrificial piggies, because they knew full well what had happened. It's like, you're going to go in the middle of like hundreds of people and you're going to basically take their stereo. And you think they're not going to try and punch you in the face, mate? You're a fucking idiot. Especially if you're going in mob-handed. You're not going in and trying to talk with them and negotiate. You know, you're not trying to negotiate a quiet time or for them to move on. No, you're going in with truncheons out, ready to bash people. What the fuck do you think's going to happen? They knew that full well, but it made perfect PR, you know, counter PR, as it were, bad PR, I should say, to disrupt the fact that there was 500,000 plus people walking through London, not wearing masks, not socially distancing, hugging, shaking hands, interacting with each other, holding up signs, listing factual information about the situation, like the all-cause mortality rates and things like that. No, don't mention that. Just look at these people who got annoyed because you took their stereo.
It's interesting you mentioned that legislation that was in. I don't know when that came in to prevent people from having just a device or
the amplification,
the amplification, a Bluetooth speaker, whatever, you know, whatever you've got.
I think it was around 2011, 2012.
Well, again, it was, because that was when they were slowly eroding your freedoms bit by bit by bit by bit, bringing in this, can't go here, can't ban this here, you can't drink alcohol there, you can stand over here, you can smoke there, you can't smoke here. All that shit was all, you know, being put upon us, and I say since 9/11, you know.
It is,
it came on big time, you know, with all that kind of legislation. You can't go in, everyone's suspicious and whatever, and that rolls into everything else that we do in life, and people just seem to accept it because it's brought in off the back of other things, as we've seen with this particular event we're going through now.
It comes in waves.
Yes, it does.
Say mention for Jeff C, you know, talking about this early last year, talking about the waves of propaganda and the way it would build up, and it has done over this year. And now in this year, it's, you know, pretty relentless. At the moment, they're still constantly bombarding us with the Indian version, the Indian situation. There again, I mentioned UK Column covered that a bit today in their episode. So just pointing out simple demographics when you're dealing with the statistics that they're showing you. Just apply a little bit of the basics of demographics and that kind of, you know, interpretation of statistics. India is a country with more than 1 billion people population. So when you look at the numbers in that sense, don't look at like, they've got 1 million people that are sick. And it's like, yeah, but what is that as a percentage of their total population?
Yeah.
What is that compared to their yearly all mortality rate? Has the all mortality rate risen in a big spike all of a sudden? No, it's just that now they're getting this alleged illness. Yeah.
It's just to back up everything else, because they've just repeated the same thing, did the same with us, with the numbers. We talked about that when it was happening.
I do really think it is just a relabeling of other already well-known seasonal illnesses, seasonal viruses. Yeah, I'm not going to
repackaged and resold to you.
I don't want to get into. It's not that I don't want to. How do I put it? I am not going to expend time and energy now, having a debate or argument about whether it's germ theory or terrain theory. The point is, the way they are telling the narrative to the populace is that there is this illness that is getting people, however it spreads and blah, blah, blah. That's that germ terrain argument. But there's allegedly this thing that people are getting, and it's, it's terrible and deadly and we're all going to die from it, that kind of bullshit. But at the same time, the reality is like, well, hang on, what happened to that other seasonal illness that we all have been suffering from for time immemorial? Why is it that those numbers have just gone? They've just reduced to zero, or pretty much zero. Now they've got a trickle, a tiny, tiny trickle of reported cases of influenza. So it doesn't take a whole lot of deductive reasoning to consider the speculation. This is a hypothesis which requires testing and evidence, and review before it could be considered as any kind of proof in one way or the other. But the hypothesis is that they have simply relabeled what we would normally call influenza, or commonly known as the flu. The coronavirus, the entire family of coronaviruses are commonly known as the flu. Yeah, that's just the way it is. Not all of them are actually influenza, but the name, to be technical about it, the nomenclature of what we refer to when people talk about the coronavirus is the flu. So when I say something like COVID is the flu, that doesn't mean what they define as SARS-CoV-2 is literally influenza, whichever strain, A, B, whatever, That's not what I'm saying. It is a coronavirus. Even according to their own argument, SARS-CoV-2 is a coronavirus. So to most people, to the average vernacular, the average use of language, it's the flu. But YouTube defines that as part of their medical misinformation, which to me is intellectually dishonest and academically inaccurate, because their interpretation of it is inaccurate. They are not considering the fact that, as I say, all coronaviruses are colloquially known as the flu.
If there was a real deadly virus out there, like they claim, you would not see any elites, Hollywood stars, or anybody with anything, you know, in popular culture or whatever, go out and, you know, do the PR, do TV, do all that stuff. They will be hiding in their, how do you call this, safe fucking basement bunkers. Right? Because they would be the most terrified people of that shit. Because they have the most to lose in their eyes, right? They think they're so much better. So the whole illusion of there is a deadly virus out there is bullcrap. Total bullcrap. It cannot be more serious than the flu, because otherwise these people would not be out. You would not see them at all. So, but that's my take on it.
No, spot on. I agree with you. Yeah, the very fact that they have been going around doing what they would normally do, and they're just doing the kind of virtual signaling on the platforms, you know, to go like, oh, here's me with my mask on, here's me doing the elbow bump, you know, all that kind of shit. But really, they're just doing what they normally do anyway. There's been plenty of evidence to show that they're still flying around the world, even though for the majority of the populations, they've basically been banned from flying there. You know, in one way or another, they have been restricted to such a degree that basically most people, the average people now, are not flying in the way we used to.
Politicians and diplomats are exempt from all the COVID rules, like wearing a mask, the vax, all that stuff. They don't have to do any of that. The testing, especially the testing, but they don't have to. They are exempt.
High value customers. You see, they're the ones who.
If there's a deadly virus, they would insist on that, that they are tested, and they would like to be safe, right?
Yeah.
Well, and Bill Gates, he bought his own private jet company recently, didn't he?
Yeah.
I think that's only
it's
so you can transport his fake burgers around the planet. That's what he's.
Yeah.
Or he's going to do like one of the Rockefellers, you know, he'll fly past in his blimp and he'll be throwing silver dollars down to us all, you know, all us poor peasants.
And has both, it will reflect the sun as well. So there's kills two birds there, one stone. It's crazy, but yeah.
But it is these kind of inconsistencies, which I know for many people, it will just be one of those things of like, it's a vent. You know, they can have a little bitch about like, oh, so-and-so celebrity has still been flying on his jet plane and whatever. And it's sort of like, fuckers. But then they still carry on about their day and put the mask on and whatever. You know, that kind of restricted, blinkered perception because the system wants them to be oppressed in that way. So they just see the tunnel vision of their life, yeah? They don't spend enough time to think, hang on, yeah, that's rather inconsistent to the narrative that the government is telling me every day on the media, you know, saying there's however many deaths and we should all be afraid and blah blah blah. But that guy over there, he's a celebrity and he's got lots of money, but he's just doing all this stuff. That's inconsistent to the narrative the bureaucracy is telling me. Let me think about that for a minute. Let me consider why there might be that inconsistency. You know, for a lot of people, they're not doing that. And I think it did come back to that trust point, you know, like we talked about earlier, you know, people trusting the medical and healthcare system to be genuinely concerned for their well-being.
And that's been ingrained into us, isn't it, from birth, you know?
And by saying that, I'm not trying to imply that those people who do work in medical and healthcare are all evil and out to kill the public and that kind of silliness. No, not at all. They as well have been tricked by that compartmentalized system of power control, of information control. They've been told from above by the people that they consider authorities on the subject that they have to treat this as a certain thing. So that's what they've done. Yeah. In effect, it's a little bit like, I'm just doing my job, mate. It's like I was taught to press the button on the machine that goes ping. So it's no good telling me about the machine that goes bong. He's doing it. No, I just do the ping machine, mate. That's all I know. I press the button and it goes ping.
Makes me think when doctors are training to be doctors or whatever, you know, when you're doing your training, when you're learning all your subject, and it comes to that virology bit of viruses and stuff, and there's questions and there's a bit of uncertainty maybe, and they just have their version of it, but you just push down that way. But if you've got any other questions or you don't believe that and you want to go that way, then you can't become a doctor because you have to agree with that and then sign your thing at the end to say, you know, they'll give you your badge, if you like, at the end if you do it all correctly. But if you have any disagreements about it all the way through, then I wonder how many have done that and saw it for what it is. Or I was thinking more the doctor who spoke out last year, Dr. Adil, he was working for the NHS, who had done, you know, obviously was a doctor, but he looked into that and knew that as well, and knew knew something wasn't right or something wasn't being taught right. And it comes right from the teachings, doesn't it? When you're teaching to be a nurse or a doctor, like I say, it's what's put before you. You say, well, that's correct. But then if you start thinking about things that are a bit more a grayer area, like you say, viruses and terrain theory and germ theory and all these different things, and Louis Pasteur and all these people, you go back and look at all their, you know, the work and what they were looking at, and there's still that sort of up in the air kind of opinion on it with a lot of things. And people have said all sorts over this last year about viruses and how they don't, reproduce them, or they are real, or they, there's all these different things we're being told.
To me, it's the same problem as how did they bring the towers down on the day of the great going away of buildings?
Yeah.
It's the same kind of argumentation. It's like, yes, it's a question that is worth investigating, and it's worth looking for information and evidence and corroboration and all that kind of good stuff. But at the same time, it's that kind of question of details and argumentation over details that the system actively wants us to get stuck on.
Yeah.
So they want us to fight with each other about whether it is one thing or the other.
And it's a theory, like say, theories.
Their shit. Yeah.
They're not truth, they're not facts, they're theories. Yeah. That's one thing I always used to wind me up back in the day.
Over time, I found I've done a couple of episodes. I think one was called something like the either or war.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that classic situation of they take something and they split it into a duality so that they can force you to fight over a false dichotomy.
Yeah.
So the classic one that I use as an example is the nature or nurture. And you just look through media, press media in general for years, and they've used that argument again and again and again and again. Or experts say that children should be raised in this particular way because of nurture. And they try and form the argument that everything is about nurture, and nature as a kind of blueprint doesn't get involved at all, full stop. And that backs up things like the critical gender theory kind of thing, because if it is purely nurture, then you can take anyone and turn them into somebody else, basically. But anyway, the point being that dichotomy, false dichotomy.
Yeah.
So in the same way as they did to us on 9/11, where they said, oh, is it explosives or is it some kind of energy weapon? Fight with each other about which one it is.
Planes or no planes, fight.
Hang on, the buildings are still gone and there's lots of people still dead.
Yeah.
You're going to fight over how it was that they actually died. They're still dead. Yeah. Whether they were killed. I saw a similar one a few years ago that some people were trying to push, and I think there was a deliberate co-intel reason for why they were pushing this argument, claiming that nuclear weapons aren't real. And I sat and I thought about it for a bit, and I thought, hang on, if you ask the people that were killed by them, whether they cared if it was truly an atomic bomb or whether it was a hydrogen bomb or some kind of version of a TNT, like the daisy cutter thing that do you think those people that were killed by it give a shit about how it actually did its thing? They're dead. It's that kind of dichotomous argument that the system wants us stuck in. The same thing now. They've tried deliberately to start an argument about, well, if you claim these conspiracy theories about this, then what do you think is actually doing it? Tell us the details of the mechanics. Is it germ theory or is it terrain theory? And if you don't choose one side or the other, you must be a shill. If you don't say it is absolutely one or the other, you're a shill. Yeah, it's all this usual kind of disinfo bullshit that they do. I don't think it's going to be a question that we can really genuinely dig into until after the majority of this narrative has been blown out the water. Yeah,
and it's more self-evident. The modeling they did last year, and the predictions that they get horribly wrong.
In my computer models, we've all got jet cars.
Yeah.
It's fucking great. I don't know what that Neil Ferguson. I don't know what he's been entering into his computer models, but when I put the data in mine, we're all flying around in jet cars. It's fucking great. Honest. I did it in computer models. You got to believe the data. Yeah. Like I mentioned, I think Wednesday, rubbish in, rubbish out.
Yeah.
You can rely on computers to be calculus machines. That is all they're meant to be. It's how we manipulate that process of calculation. The functions we use. 2 + 2 is not the same as 2 divided by 2. The function you put into the system gives you a result. You know, the computer's just doing what it's told. If you tell it to do stupid things, it will give you stupid information. Yeah. So Neil Ferguson sitting there like, the population's all made of zombies that are full of virus, and they're all spitting on each other and rubbing poo on each other. And look, millions of deaths. What a surprise. Oh, wow. My model must be accurate.
Text borrows quick. Yeah, tell him. Yeah.
Sorry, being silly.
No, but they are daft though, aren't they? Just, I mean, and it's been revealed. Like I say, the self-evidence is there since the whole year. You know,
one of the things, again, shout out to Larkin Rose. You know, I've talked about him over the years, and I've shared his stuff many times over the years. I definitely think he's one of the people that talks a lot of good sense, and he's worth your time and attention. Yeah, but like he was talking about today, it's that classic situation of the system. I was saying classic again a lot, so the system, the bureaucracy, the wannabe controllers want to give us a perception of them having abilities that they just don't. You know, it's like the canard of so you think they control everything. And it's, no, they don't literally control everything. You know, that's just a bit ridiculous, to take what I'm saying that far, but they have enough influence over the mechanics of how society runs that pretty much they control a hell of a lot of what goes on, yes. But to claim that they control everything, or to try and strawman my argument by saying that that's what I mean when I talk about the controllers or the big agendas or whatever. No, they don't literally control everything. Yeah, and they don't.
They're trying. They're trying.
They don't have godly powers. You know, even though they love to portray that kind of concept. You know, they're like demigods. Like we talk about the elites as if they're that kind of separate class of being the demigods on the Mount of Olympus kind of thing. Yeah, and it's and Bill Gates is going to do this, and Bill Gates is going to do that. He's a little dweeb. He doesn't do these things. He just influences others to do them for him. Yeah?
Yeah.
Bill Gates didn't force you to buy a Windows-operated machine, but he did influence the marketplace to saturate your choices and to monopolize the industry to such a degree that we're here today in a situation where the majority of people and the majority of systems, even in the bureaucracy itself, are running on his operating system. Yeah, that's the way that kind of shit works. It doesn't mean they literally control everything and they have some kind of godly power to do magic, forcing people to do certain things. No. They influence through narrative and through compartmentalization, information control.
Well, Bill can call me up tomorrow, give me $1 billion, and I'll shut up.
Maybe I'll join you on that one. If we all do it, do you think he'd invest in that? Yeah.
Well, he's pumping money. Like I say, he pays these guys big fat wages, doesn't he, to do what he wants them to do?
Why not?
Yeah.
They do it,
Yeah.
Bill, sponsor us. We need a sponsor. Come on.
And he creates, in a similar fashion to the other one. I mean, whenever I try and remember his name, I just get the image of the emperor out of the fucking Star Wars, Soros.
Bezos.
Well, him as well. No, I was thinking Soros in the sense of he's quite skilled at generating wells of influence. In other words, from the shadows, he'll put funding into certain areas that will create little groups, think tanks, NGOs, different types of groups, even commercial groups, that will then become an influence on that particular marketplace or demographic. That's what Soros has been doing for the past few decades. He invests in little places here and there that to the general observer, you think, oh, you know, he's just being the philanthropist kind of thing. But no, what he's doing is creating power bases that then will put pressure onto certain parts of society to influence the narrative in the direction that he wants it to go.
Well, I
he
tell you what,
manipulates governments.
it's
basically.
good news that people in the black communities know about Soros as well. It's getting out there. People know about this Black Lives Matter movement, and they know where the money's coming from. Just like with the Occupy movement years back in 2010, 11, that was 11, here in London, and it happened in New York as well, and across cities, and I remember it. And that was all funded by Soros. That was Soros's little project as well. And his philosophy is to bring down America. He doesn't like America, so he'll do everything. He's just another evil twat, basically, or whatever you want to describe him. He's got an agenda, and he's got the money to do it. He's just like these other guys we mentioned. So same sort of thing. They're evil.
I would suggest that he has been tasked, because he's just a puppet of other power groups, you know, power influence groups.
Yeah.
He has been tasked to aid the dismantling of America in particular, the USA in particular, so that it can be transitioned. Because, like we talked about for years, you know, they can't build the new until they've destroyed the old. The new is built out of the rubble of the old. So they need to dismantle most of the nations around the world so that they can transition them into that China model.
Yeah.
This is why they've been systematically breaking down what is considered normative in most of the Western nations. You know, they've been deliberately, systematically debasing them and breaking them down in one way or another.
It's not so much financing, because these groups get a lot of donations. In America, I think they got $1 billion or close to $1 billion in donations, BLM alone. Yeah. So, you know, they extort also the normal people with their so-called
people can say that now. It's been exposed. I think I was listening to
how many companies have put money into that whole BLM bullshit, right? And then the next night they get their windows smashed in and stuff like that, you know, or the whole store burned down and looted.
And again, where does all the money go? You know, who's the beneficiary? Who's benefiting? It's not the people, of course, not ever, because these are all dodgy bastards.
The BLM leader bought $1 million house, right?
Yeah.
So
she's helping prop up the housing market. She's working for the economy, folks. Honest.
Yeah.
There's nothing capitalist about that.
And that's exactly how they do it, Cookie. They work on these small little, you know, get these little charities, these NGOs, these little groups. They'll pump money into them, get people then to, like you say, influence the influencers, and using that, you know, the media and the internet mainly, isn't it, to push it.
Now it is,
now more not television anymore. Sitting there watching television.
I think possibly
still doing that.
But I don't want. Sorry, but I don't want to sound racist. But when you give a bleep person $1 million, you know what's going to happen, right?
They're going to spend it.
They're going to spend it on bling and shit, and you know everybody's going to know about it. So
what was that? Eddie Murphy movie, something Millions, where he had to spend like $1 million.
Brewster's Millions,
was it? Yeah, he had to spend $1 million, otherwise he couldn't get the rest of the inheritance.
Richard Pryor, wasn't it?
Richard Pryor, sorry.
Yeah, that one. He had so much money to. Yeah. I think it was called that.
You give me all that money and I've got to spend it. Yeah.
Well, they said that when they were talking about last year with the hopium stuff, about all this money was going to just come into your accounts, and the quantum money systems.
The trickle down.
We're all going to give us all the money that had been hidden away by, you know, centuries of corruption, and it was all going to get released, and we're all going to be wealthy. And I
can't wait for
when they said it. I was like, this is like red flag. You know, it's like, wow, come on. You know, and they were saying this last year, people were actually buying into it. It's like, come on. It's also you've got to do it. It's not going to be someone, you know, just flicking a switch and going, there you go.
Well, some of them, I it's been a few weeks, I think, since I saw this, but there was some mention of this is actually sort of making its way through getting approval. But they're still talking about reparations. And it's sort of, I can't wait for reparations. That would be great, mate. It's like, oh, so your great granddad was a slave in America, was he? So you're going to get what, a few 100,000 maybe? Well, my ancestors were slaves to the Romans. Where's my fucking reparations? I want quite a few billion
from the Vatican.
By the time you've added inflation, I want all our wealth back from those fuckers. So yeah, let's have reparations. Let's go for it.
Yeah, well,
I still want some money from the Germans.
Yeah. But has that actually finally been paid off yet?
I think it has, just recently, a few years ago, not that long ago.
Well, I think that was only
the Jews get a paycheck every year, still.
From America, is it? US send them billions every year anyway.
Oh, that's
no. The Germans for reparations.
Oh, the Germans. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, but the Americans do send Israel a huge amount of cash every year. Anyway,
it's like 4,000 to 5,000 euros a year, something like that, depending on how many family members and shit.
So does the UK, and the UK donates
a lot of money
to the state of Israel. Yeah?
Maybe
the Jewish people.
Oh, yeah.
Now they're giving it all in furlough. Maybe not anymore, Well,
don't worry, they'll soon be bringing in the digital bank currency, so you won't have to worry about it anymore. Now they'll just transfer money to each other and say they're doing it in your name. Yeah, you won't have to do anything. You just get your digital biometric ID, and you wave your device at the door when you go in the shop, and you just pick up your Soylent Green ration. And you're not quite meat burger, if you're lucky, if it's your birthday, and then you go back to your cubicle. You won't have to ever see money ever again. They'll just tell you every so often. It's like, we made 100 million off your crypto identity, and we transferred that to your bank account. But then we transferred it straight away to all the debtors, all the people that you owe money to, like your landlord and whatever. You won't ever see money again.
Could we?
But they'll still be using it. They'll be exchanging it in that economic system.
Could we cash in our birth certificates now? Is that okay now? We can actually get what's due to us by doing that.
That's another rabbit. It's another rabbit that goes nowhere.
I know.
You will never be able to cash them in. I've never seen anyone show real proof.
It's like the media. It's like the media telling the truth, isn't it? It's about as rare as that, and all about as possible as those things,
And it still relies on the same problem of like the argument we talked about for years, going all the way back to like 2012, and that. If they are trying to, or somebody's trying to tell you that there is a piece of paper that you can sign that enables you to get out of the paper world of the state system, they're an idiot or they're a liar trying to sell you something. But because you cannot sign a piece of paper to cancel out another piece of paper. Their paper world system, and which is now being steadily transferred into a virtual world digital system, doesn't work like that. It's for dealing with dead entities. It's for dealing with things that are not actually part of the real world. It's conceptual. So you cannot erase a concept by creating another concept. It's not going to happen. So, chasing that rabbit of thinking you can cash in your birth certificate to get a fuckload of money and escape the system, it's not going to happen.
Oh no, I just said it as a sort of, I knew it was
It's got legitimate points to the argument.
But what I'm saying
they have been doing. They have been using
that whole enslavement process from when you're born it's in that, and your straw man in your birth certificate. In that,
they use your registration, which is what that certificate is. It's a regis. It's a handing over to the regis to the ruler. Yeah. They use that as a commodity, which they invest in themselves, in their system, that is a prediction based on your potential earnings during your lifetime.
Yeah.
And they then can modify that and they exchange it for more debt.
Yes.
So basically, they use your birth certificate to generate debt, not money, not wealth, as people comprehend it. When people say money, they usually mean wealth. No, they use it to generate debt, which is part of how they fuel their economic bullshit system. It's not a true capitalist system. It's a crony, at best it's a crony capitalist system. It's nothing of the sort. It's just an illusion of debt-based manipulation.
And why do you have to write 10 versions of something? If it's honest, it's honest. If it's truthful, it's truthful.
Yeah.
Why do you have to have 10 laws, dictionaries, and 500 amendments to whatever? You know, this is where we're all being misled. Taking, yeah, exactly. Manipulate the bullshit and lies better, moving the goalposts continually, it seems. Now,
finding the gaps in the fence. Yeah, that was another analogy used years ago. Yeah, they like to give us these ideas so that we will go and find the gaps in their fences so that they can come along and fill in that gap.
It's not real. Someone made it up. Let's make up something better. Isn't it? It's, you know, it's not serving us.
Back to the narrative creation again, storytelling.
Yeah.
Their story's crap. Let's make up our own.
Exactly. Right. We'll do our own. Yeah. That's the seeds have been planted now and have been for a few generations now, isn't it? I would say, where we've been shit shoveling for quite a while now, slot, you know, as you call it. You know, making it easier for people to come along and do. And now they've made it even easier because they've pulled this event off. And I think that's just been the backfiring. You know, didn't see what's going to come out of that. You know,
I think they're overconfident in their ability to manipulate the population's perception on such a large scale that they think they can steer the entire world in a particular direction. That's what they're gambling on. That's why recently I described it as that it's one big giant spinning plate. Yeah, they have gambled the whole farm, as they say, on this endeavor, on this narrative that they're selling.
No, we just
once
take
it starts
the wheel.
tipping over, it's going to crash.
Yeah, we'll take the wheel. We'll drive it from now. You know, we'll take it in a better direction. That's where we need to be going, and that's the process we're going through now. We're living through this. You know, it's you know, we're seeing on Saturday, you know, a mass amount come out, and I think that's just going to get bigger and bigger, like I said before, right through the year.
And as I mentioned as well, that kind of steady, I think it's more than just pushback now. I know a lot of people have used that phrase. I think I've used it myself recently, talking about pushback and things like the gathering in London is kind of like the pushback effect.
Yeah.
But really, I think it's gone past that point now. This is not so much pushback as this is like, in an ironic fashion, the video footage of the evening in Hyde Park on Saturday is an example of what is happening at the moment on a kind of geopolitical grand scale. The PC piglets, you know, that, like I described earlier, were sent in as like sacrificial piglets. When they start running for that car park, that's what the narrative, the system's narrative is doing at the moment. So it's more than just a pushback. They are almost on the verge of being routed, you know, in a kind of battlefield sense. You know, when you get routed, it basically means your unit's cohesion has completely fallen apart and everyone's just running for their lives and the enemy is just chasing you and hacking at you, you know?
It all turns to shit.
That's what it ended up as in Hyde Park on Saturday evening. Yeah, them coppers realised that they'd been thrown into a hornet's nest, like the idiot blue bottles that they are, and they ran for that car park because they knew they were going to get surrounded. Yeah, that's what I think people like Fauci. Flip-flop Fauci, I've heard some people call him, which I think is appropriate here. Wear a mask, don't wear a mask. Wear 3 masks, don't wear any mask. Oh, no. We still don't know if Texas is going to suffer some kind of surge because of them reducing the restriction or getting rid of the restrictions. You know, I think there's 5 states in the USA now as well that have put in some kind of legislation or legislative block on the introduction of passports or the use of certifications in that kind of fashion. In other words, refusing service to somebody because they can't prove they've been vaccinated or whatever. So that's, you know, as well as the other stuff that we've mentioned, like multiple of the states now have dropped all the restrictions. Here in the UK, even though the government haven't really dropped the lockdown restrictions, there's a hell of a lot more people just going about doing their thing. And again, like we saw on Saturday, all those people there just interacting with each other like we normally used to. Yeah, no social distancing, no mask wearing, no bullshit. No bullshit.
Be free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you see some of that footage, you know, if the footage is allowed to reside on YouTube or whatever for long enough for people to see it, you see that kind of mixture of people. You know, this is not just a bunch of students or a bunch of lefties or whatever. You know, there is no uniformity to them other than they are people. The only other thing I could sort of point at as a uniformity is the majority of signs and placards and banners and stuff like that were all homemade, which I thought was fucking brilliant. Yeah, it's great. That is the difference of a natural, organic response or reaction to something. People just do what they can with what they have. You know, so if that means you want to hold up a sign to get a point across to all the people around you, you don't need to, you know, get an official sign from some union that's been printed in a workshop. No, you just get a bit of cardboard and a pen and boom, there you go, there's my sign. And you could see that as kind of like a uniformity. But as I say, to me, that demonstrates a more organic, natural response, a genuine response.
Yeah, good energy being, you know, as well, you know, where it's not fear, it's all love, it's all people connecting, happy and comfortable and just getting together and walking, doing what they do. But they, like I say, they always want to spoil it at the end or try and do something, but it's not going to work. I think, like I say, it's I
think the majority of people have got over the shock now.
Yeah. They realised.
What I was trying to describe earlier is like there was the initial shock, which sort of, for a lot of people, that's all you need to get them to march in line, basically. You know, you just need to give them something threatening to terrify them, and then boom, they'll jump straight in. They won't consider anything. They'll just react straight away. And it's taken them about a year plus to just see the stacking up of inconsistencies and hypocrisies and counter evidence and argument, etc. And now they're starting to relinquish that obedience. Yeah. Everybody's entitled to act foolish for 5 minutes every day or something. I can't remember the quote properly. Yeah, we all get fooled in one way or another at some point. For the majority of us, we're usually fooled by our parents into believing that there's some magic guy who lives at the North Pole who brings you gifts once a year.
Well, they're more of the conformist generation. I think when we were born, as you were saying before, 60s, 70s, I think we were the ones that were pushing that away. That we weren't.
We were being raised by parents who had experienced a wartime environment.
Yeah.
So that had a knock-on effect of making us more obedient to authority in a way. Yeah. But it also, as we changed generation, it allowed that power of three. I've talked about this before, how it takes 3 generations to change a society. Because you have to allow for the oldest generation to die off so that the gnosis, the experiential knowledge of that bad time period is lost. So then the newest generation becomes complacent and more manipulable, more pliant to propaganda and narrative.
And that's what we got now. That's what they've been doing. Yeah.
But now we've got to the stage where the sheer ridiculousness of this whole narrative that they keep repeating, because from what I'm saying, please don't think I'm trying to imply that they're suddenly going to give up telling the bullshit and they're going to throw up their hands and go, oh, we just tricked you, fooled you, psych, oh, we didn't mean it. You know, they're not going to do any shit like that. They are so all in. They have to be, considering what is on the table, you know, what they're playing for. So they're not going to give up on this. They're going to carry on pushing it, and they're going to carry on trying to get as much as they can in exchange for the situation they've created. So I think I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, maybe. So like the concept of when Bojo purposefully talked about having a passport to go in a pub to get a point, the reason he mentions that is because that is the extreme that they know full well they're not going to get away with, but they suggest the extreme so that everybody gets all upset and up in arms about that extreme possibility. So then when they suggest the lesser thing, most people go, oh, okay then. Yeah, as long as you don't do that really extreme thing, we'll put up with the lesser thing. We'll accept the lesser thing. Yeah, they're not going to push for pubs, passports for pubs, but they're still trying to push the idea of passports for big events, sports events, concerts, things like that.
Yeah.
If they get that foot in the door, then it's only going to be a few years down the line when they'll turn around and go, oh, well, you know, you've been okay with having the passports for doing this, that, and the other. So now we're going to, you know, we need to do it for this and this and this and this. They will not stop trying to get what it is they want, you know, that situation that they want. So don't expect them to suddenly, you know, change their tune overnight. I don't think they are, but they are already starting to eat each other. Yeah, I've made this point multiple times as well. Yeah, when you're playing a game of psychopaths, at some point other psychopaths are going to try and eat you, because that's part of the game of the psychopaths. You know, as the hierarchy gets higher up, as you go higher and higher up that pyramid, there's only so much room. There's only so many people can fit into each tier of that pyramid. So if it starts to become overcrowded, like rats in a sack, they'll start eating each other to reduce the numbers or push some back down. Yeah. So when they start to fumble the ball of the narrative, I'm using a lot of metaphors, I know. When they start to fumble that ball, they'll start turning on each other. And this is part of why I think the even though it served their purpose to be a distraction story, at the same time, the situation around Cummins and Bojo and what's his face, spam face, Cameron, recently, and that Greensill debacle, which was
the lobbying row.
Yeah, it was another one of those. Well, why are you telling us something that was already known by most people and is an obvious, apparent abuse of the system anyway?
Yeah,
that we've all, you know, the public have been shouting and complaining about for decades. But all of a sudden you want to go, oh, and this politician, he was doing it as well. It's like, yeah, we know you're all fucking at it.
Yeah.
But you want to occupy our attention by putting that story in front of us again. You know, they are fumbling the ball and they're starting to predate on each other. It's not going to be too long, I think, that they're going to start actually more directly pointing fingers at each other. And we may even start to see some resigning or being, you know, removed from whatever position they were in, etc., etc.
Yeah. Well, we're seeing it in politics. We're seeing it in the royals as well.
Yeah.
You know, that's all falling apart.
He's a racist. No, he's a racist. No, you're a racist. No, I've died and I've become a virus.
Yeah, well, you know, so it's like you say, it's happening. And I did say this year there would be the revelations would be out, and we're seeing, like I say, with the royals already, and now we're seeing politically things starting to unravel, it seems, and they're yeah.
I think we're in the kind of
what else is next? You know, what
the
else?
ripple effect.
Yeah, I mean, another big, you know, Dominic Cummings, you know, expose in the Sunday Sun. You know, you know, Boris is a, you know, whatever. Or he's, you know, like I said, he left that job. When was it? When did he leave that job? Was it last year or this year? I can't remember. But when he left, he would have took things that he was going to take, wasn't he? He'd have all the text messages. He'd have his, you know, they've got about 10 mobile phones. You know, they say they got 2. You know,
Yeah.
they've got
They talk about
all the
criminals.
emails. Yeah.
Criminals having burner phones. Yeah, and they try and tell us some bullshit about how all your phones have got to be registered. He's part of that whole network system again. Yeah.
Yeah.
You've all got to be registered. We've got to know what your devices are and where you use it. You can't have burner phones. Oh no, only criminals need burner phones.
And Boris.
Oh, so
Boris always calls
politicians.
it. He always calls it tittle tattle. It's just tittle tattle. It's like,
Whiff waff.
Yeah.
Let the bodies pile high. 10,000 dead. Oh, whiff waff.
We're
Let's
not
have
having
another
another
10,000 dead. Whiff waff.
We're not having another lockdown. Just pile the bodies up over there.
I think there could potentially be more of a transition in terms of political situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, like for Pete over there, they've had a recent election. The US has obviously had their selection, maybe would be better to say than election. But I could see the UK possibly heading towards that fairly soon as well. I think you mentioned that earlier before we started.
Yeah, I do. I've got a feeling it's gonna maybe go that direction at some point.
Some of this shit could result in things like voter no confidence and stuff like that. I mean, they were quite happy to do that to Theresa May, and now in what is obviously a much more serious situation with potentially much more deadly consequences for the decisions they're making, then even more so a vote of no confidence could be justified.
He's only been in just over, well, is it coming up 2 years in December it will be, so he's been in 18 months, and look at the chaos.
But not just him, people like Handicock.
Oh, the lot of them, all of them. And the
only thing
team.
The only thing that bothers me with that kind of possibility, and talking about possibilities, is that they could use that kind of method to fade into the background. They'll have some kind of vote of no confidence against them, or some point will be raised against them, like Cummins and what he's saying about Bojo. And then Bojo will just go, oh, yeah, it was me. Mea culpa, you got me. I'll retire now. Bye. Thanks for the retirement fund, folks.
Yeah, they just give up the post and then move on, and that's what they do. Is you have to resign, and that's punishment enough, it seems.
Yeah, and you can go and get yourself a nice little earner like Tony Blyer.
Yeah,
Tony B. Liar. You turn up at a dinner and talk crap to people for half an hour and get paid $250,000. Yeah, that's a nice little earner, isn't it?
I think of something there funny about it. Just imagine him in McDonald's. I don't know, but yeah.
Well, one other thing I want to mention is just checking back at my notes. Well, there's a couple of other things I want to mention, but this one thing that I heard somebody else talk about yesterday, I think it was Carl Vernon on one of his videos, I think. Anyway, he mentioned about people taking IQ tests. Oh no, so it was UK column this afternoon. If you got everyone in the country to take an IQ test, then you'd notice a spike in the morons. So when they're talking about the number of people being tested and there being a spike in cases, it's like, well, duh. If you're doing more testings, then of course you're going to get a spike in the numbers.
Yeah. And
somebody had sort of worded that on a sticker that they'd stuck on one of the coppers' backs on the protest march. So if you got everyone in the country to do an IQ test, then you'd see a spike in morons. Yeah? And I wonder if they would be willing to do a mandatory IQ test. Just an idea. Would they do a mandatory IQ test across the country? That'd be interesting. I wonder what some of the politicians and police would score.
Very low.
Maybe it's not such a good idea because you might end up with such a terrible picture of the state of the nation's cognitive ability.
No, they don't want to take us that direction, make us think too much and self-examine ourselves and look at ourselves. They don't want that. You look out there. External.
But that could go into the questions or arguments about, well, what kind of IQ test are you referring to? Some of them are not really a good portrayal of somebody's true intelligence or their mental abilities. Some of them can give you good information about whether a person is good at calculating or using mathematics, or they
That-
might give you an idea that they're good at spatial awareness and things like that, but giving you a kind of whole picture of their abilities, it's not a very good way of doing
It's
it.
not really, is it? It's just
No.
logic. It's just one-sided.
Yeah.
It's just
It
that.
can, the way it's commonly used, it is completely biased to what is usually called left brain thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, the usual IQ tests that you get presented with are all about left brain thinking. So it completely disparages people who don't think that way. You know, if you're more right brain inclined, then an IQ test would probably make you look like an idiot, whereas that's not necessarily accurate. Yeah, you might be a complete genius in right brain related things like art or music. You might be a musical genius, but you take an IQ test and it says you're a dummy. You know,
You can't do maths, you see, if you're not very mathematical. That was always the baseline of how intelligent you were when you were growing up.
Yeah.
In the years ago, it was always based on your math. It probably is now. It's those subjects. It's math. If you score low at maths, you wear the dunce's hat, sit in the corner. You know, you shit it.
They have purposefully guided the majority of the population. They wanted to be left brain thinkers because that's that kind of analytical thinking, problem solving thinking it can be highly beneficial to your society, to your tribe, because you'll get people who fix problems and create stuff. You know, they create new machines, new technologies, etc. But at the same time, it's like the cultural death knell, because what you end up with on the counterpoint is a complete loss of art and culture.
Spirituality and things like that.
People are not machines. Why are we now veering rapidly towards a society that seems very mechanistic and robot-like? Because they've spent probably the last 2 generations at least creating that kind of psyche in the majority of people. Most people are left brain inclined, or they've been molded into restricting themselves to that way of thinking. Yeah. If you ask most people, like, do you think in images or words? And they'll struggle with that one for a little bit. And the realization usually, hopefully for most people, is like, well, it's a bit of a mixture of both. And good. Because if you find it difficult to think in images and pictures, then you're not accessing your right brain. Yeah. And again, this, you know, it's not strictly speaking purely in the right hemisphere. It's just a way of referring to different parts of the brain that get utilized in different ways. And left brain thinking is words, structure, linear progression, planning, problem solving, you know, sequential problem solving. Both can be useful. And really, you want people that are capable of doing both at the same time, and, you know, unifying those 2 different abilities, not having them as separate things. That's why we've got so many people that are emotionally stunted or socially awkward, because things that we do in a society fashion, you know, our interactions with each other, social groupings, things like that, they are more right brain than left brain. If you think you can apply left brain thinking to things like social interactions, then you're a sociopath. Because that's how a sociopath approaches it, and that's one of the definitions that diagnoses sociopathy. A sociopath looks at a social situation and says, well, if I give them this face, they're going to probably like me, and there could be a chance that I can influence them and maybe benefit from them for myself in some fashion. Whereas most people, non-sociopaths, will look at a social situation and go, well, oh, he looks like he could be a good laugh to chat to. I'll go and have a talk to him. Hello, mate, how are you? And the facial expressions and the mannerisms are natural and organic, and they just flow from their personality. Yeah, a sociopath doesn't. A sociopath calculates which social interactions to apply, which social methods to apply to the people they're interacting with. That's what I mean, left brain, right brain. You know, why have we got a societal situation where a lot of people struggle with that kind of emotional intelligence and things like social interactions? Well, we now got a generation of completely socially awkward kids who can only interact with each other in what is a pseudo left brain method, in other words, texting, that requires left brain thinking, put one letter after the other to create a sequential system of words, yeah, creating narrative, linear narrative. Somebody who's an artist would just paint a picture, you know, there's no borders to that picture apart from the limitation of the canvas size. Hopefully you get the point, yeah. We've got people that are stuck in a left brain mentality, which means they then find it difficult and awkward. They struggle with things that would be right brain utilization, you know, right brain application.
Remedy.
Yeah. So they find it difficult to empathize with others, relate with others, etc., and that leads to a more narcissistic environment where people just care about getting to a goal that they have set or have been given by some external entity. Yeah, and it's all about that sequential process of, like, here, kitty, kitty, as Alan Watts described it. That's the other Watts. Yeah.
Yeah.
The guy with the goatee beard, you know, he described it as the here kitty kitty game. You know, they give you a thread to follow. They tell most students, oh, you got to develop your 5-year plan. If you don't know what you're going to be doing over the next 5 years, how do you know what course you want to study and where your results are going to get you? You know, what career you're going to go into, and so. Yeah, so you have to sequentially plan it, and you just go from one point to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. It's like a mouse in a corridor in the maze. You can't stop and look over the walls and realize that you're in a maze. Sorry, I'm rambling a bit.
No, I just
trying to
take
make
back
that
when I was
point
when I was about 16, and they said that to me. What do you want? You know, when you're that sort of, I was like, no idea. You know, I didn't know. I have a clue. I think
I still don't.
No. Yeah, it's like, it's just
over the years I did refine my answer into just happy.
Yeah.
What do you want to be in life? Happy. There you go.
Yeah.
It's not a career. It's not a goal like a billionaire, or I want a big house and cars and all that. No, it's happy. That will do. Thank you.
Yeah.
If I manage to get through life and I've got that, then I think I'm doing all right. Okay.
But they're still wanting people to have a certain amount of intelligence, you see, where they keep them in the left. So they want you to be able to do the things in society that need doing, and they need that. But the other side, the right, or I would call the spiritual half of yourself as well, that, like you say, that the good stuff about yourself, they've always, and I've said this for years, and keep that away. It's even dressed up as new age now, and it's even all false. A lot of it, people are doing stuff they don't even realize they're dabbling in demonic shit. They don't even realize what they're doing, and that's where they've taken it. That's if you want to go down that route or whatever, but
they're often tripping themselves up in doing those things. They're restricting their own progress in a way by getting stuck in little circles of bullshit.
But we're all here to, again, we're here to, grow and learn, and look what they're throwing at us. It's a great time, really, to sort of realize who you are, and it's a powerful time to be living in, I think. Even though you've got to put up with some shit, but seeing people rise up and seeing people see it, and that truth, truth is truth. We've said that all the time. It's the truth. What is it? That's shines brighter. You can't bury it. It's beginning to surface. People are seeing it. Like you say, the imploding's happening. The attacking on each other's going on. And we're only in April, so it's going to get more and more intense as we go through the rest of this year.
I think it's also going to get more and more joyfully intense, or intensely joyful.
Yeah, because I think again, it's like people, seeing the bullshit, basically. Everybody not, laughing at Sky, laughing at Steve, and saying, "Go away with your crap."
You've got that relief effect of realizing that the danger that you've been terrified with by the state system, by their propaganda, etc., has just turned out to be completely phantasm. It's just a phantasm, and you get that relief of, oh, fucking hell, it was just a shadow.
It was
Yeah.
just an episode of The Simpsons we were stuck in. That's all.
The cat flu.
That's all it was.
Yeah.
But now we've realised. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, that you will get a lot of people will get that relief effect, which will hopefully, allow them to get back to that sense of joy. I think I might have tried to describe this recently. You get a much stronger sudden grounding when people have that relief effect. That kind of realization of, like, in a really cliched, cheesy kind of fashion, it's like all of a sudden all the clouds in the sky, all those dark clouds just roll back and you get to see the sun and the sky's lovely, and like it was on Saturday for most of the UK. You get that relief that gives you a very strong grounding effect. Hopefully more and more people will be getting that now this year. I know last year it was much more oppressive because the actual lockdowns were, in place all over most of the country, and it was quite restrictive, and a lot of people were in fear. So you had that kind of psychic output from a large number of people, that it had that kind of cloud of doom effect. You'd walk down the street and you'd see people walking along with that kind of shifty-eyed look of like, oh, avoid him, oh, I'm not going over there. They were obviously scared, they were in fear. And that has a knock-on effect, as a sphere of influence. All of us have that kind of auric influence around us, the energy that you output. So you can feel it when people are in fear. I'm sure most people are aware of that kind of thing, even if you don't consider yourself empathic in any way. It's nothing like that. It's just you can sense when people are terrified. And that has, like I say, a knock-on effect. It's almost infectious in itself. And some people have said that. Fear is the virus. That is the main thing that we need a vaccination for, not their fucking bullshit Trojan horse. It's that, and the relief effect of more and more people realizing that they'd been sold a big pile of bullshit, and they were just being terrified by shadows on the wall. I think that's a lot of what I saw. That's what I saw on Saturday in a lot of the people. They were just happy and joyful. It wasn't, oh, we're angry at the government, we're angry about it. No, they were happy and joyful.
Just go out.
That's that relief effect hitting, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to really describe it. But mention a couple of other things before we wrap it up, because we're just coming up to the hour. If you are so inclined, because I know this might seem a bit sort of counter to what we're often talking about, because we'll often talk about reducing your use of this kind of media stuff, social media and all that kind of, looking at the news media and stuff. So this might seem a bit sort of counter to that kind of statement, but this, it's on my playlist, so it's going to give a long link or whatever. Just a shout out to a video that was put up by Please Stop the Ride. It's just titled "Watch More YouTube." I think she deliberately titled it like that, just to poke the irony of, like, we're telling you to watch more YouTube. If you choose to, if you have the time and the patience and the resilience to watch some of this stuff, because sometimes what you have to sit and listen to some of these people talking about is, I know it might sound a bit hyperbolic, but it is shocking sometimes to listen to the way they'll talk about stuff quite matter-of-factly, and you're sat there listening to it knowing that if you do that kind of shit, man, the consequences are going to be immense, but you're just sat there talking about it as if it's nothing. What the fuck? But anyway, if you watch her video, she'll give you some pointers towards some of the channels that are the outlets, or the kind of face front, the shop front for the public, for some of the NGOs and the commercial groups, the commercial businesses and ventures that are working on some of the technology and some of the theoretical developments that link into a lot of the subjects we're often talking about. I think it's worth sort of pointing this out to people because, you know, most people, when you come into this kind of information, when you first starting looking around at this stuff, you'll see a lot of the usual suspects' names, like David Icke, you know, and, you know, I could list off a laundry list of names, whatever. But you've got questions about the situation and the shit that's been happening, and you like go looking for information, and you get presented with this wall of like the conspiracy threads, you know, and often it can be difficult to go, well, I want to know about this particular subject, but this is just some guy with a beard on a screen ranting about the government. So, you know, I want to know about so-and-so agenda or such and such document or theory or whatever. So it's worth, if you are interested in that kind of thing, look for the channels that are the actual face front, the shop front, the public face of those businesses and companies and NGOs that are actually doing a lot of this policy promotion and propagandizing and technology development. So that's a big part of what Camille spends her time doing. Please Stop the Ride.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and many thanks to her for having the effort and the energy and the resilience to do that, because some of this stuff some of it can be really boring because it's somewhat academic in some of them, and they, you know, very long-winded, and if you don't know the jargon you might get lost in, you know, what is it they're talking about. But often, like I say, it can be quite shocking because you sat there listening to these people talking just plain as day, saying, oh yeah, and then there's going to be this, and then we'll shove that in there, and we'll zap that there, and hey. But if you have the time and energy and you want to look for information, you want to find some corroboration and evidence and proof that a lot of the subject matter that we're often talking about is not just conspiracy speculation, it's not just fantasy fiction, you know, from some dystopian movie or novel, you know, that was written 4 decades ago or whatever. These are things that are occurring now. The technologies are being worked on. The ideas are being promoted. And when it comes to things like political theory and, you know, theories that are getting forced into the academic world, into the school curriculum, etc., these are the kind of subjects that get covered by those channels, some of them. Yeah, but yeah, check it out if you want. And don't think that they are the all-powerful demigods that they like to portray themselves as. Yeah, they're not. Like I always like to say, the Queen is just a little old lady in a really big house. I'm sure her voice echoes terribly, and when she farts, it must, like, you know, reverberate through the Buckingham Palace.
The bowels of the earth.
Yeah, I think good time to. I was going to share some memes, but there ain't really much time now, so I'll leave it for this week. And it fits what I wanted to do anyway. It's just been us talking this week. Thanks for giving us your attention, folks. Sorry I didn't do a shout out this week. Maybe next time. But thank you to everyone in the chat. I can see there's been lots of chat. So I was just reading what Tassie had posted. Something is planned for the cruise industry. They are calling for all crew passengers to be vaxxed before 31st of October, but no mention of what happens from the 1st of November. Right. So they're sort of setting an ultimatum timeline then. Well, yeah, it's that's just after the summer as well. So yeah, we'll see how this summer progresses. And enjoy the sunshine, folks. Get out and about if you can. Go and enjoy the nature. Put down your phone. Take some time for yourself. All that good stuff. And yeah, keep talking, keep debating. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back again Wednesday night for the reality chat. Hopefully Steve will be on. I hope he's okay. Shout out for Steve. He wasn't on Thursday, but hopefully he'll be back this Thursday for the mystery show. And we'll see you again soon. Take care, folks.
Cheers.
Good cheese.